Welcome back from that short break. In case you're just joining us, this is the News International Edition, and we're coming to you live from our Vision Group headquarters here in Kampala, Uganda. Now, when people were diagnosed with HIV more than 3 decades ago, it was considered a death sentence. But after suffering through discrimination, the loss of loved ones, and the brutal side effects of drugs, advances in treatment over the years have allowed millions of people to live with the virus. Now, to mark the 40th anniversary of the discovery of the virus that causes HIV/AIDS, we have some stories from some of the survivors.
Health services, research, patients and prevention. As the 40th anniversary of the discovery of the virus that causes AIDS approaches, this team from the Pasteur Institute remembers what marked the first step in the fight against an epidemic that would kill more than 40 million people. A 59-year-old activist and lawyer who lives north of the Australian city of Melbourne reveals he was first diagnosed with HIV in 1991 but had probably already had it for several years. Although he asked for a test in 1986, his doctor advised against it because at the time there were no treatments and the political climate was very bad for people with HIV. After his diagnosis, Kidd started on an antiretroviral drug called AZT, which made him very sick but saved his life. Now he takes just one daily pill with no side effects. A 62-year-old retiree in the southwestern French city of Bayonne unknowingly contracted HIV in 1984 from her then-boyfriend. She did not find out until a decade later, when she was tested after falling ill with bronchitis. But a new 3-drug regimen in 1995 changed things. Joel Vermont, a 58-year-old living in the eastern suburbs of Paris, found out he had HIV in 1992. When he started on AZT, the abominable side effects led him to losing nearly 30 kilograms. Then the new 3-drug regimen didn't work on him. After being discriminated against at work, he spent 8 years on sick leave before winning a court case.
C'était en janvier 1983.
The lesson is that we must always remain vigilant with regard to viruses and bacteria, because there are parasites that surround us that have learned to mutate, to change, to hide, to persist in our organism. So we must have great vigilance, not remain idle.
Ce virus était le meilleur candidat pour être la cause du sida.
A 36-year-old deputy director of a women-focused non-profit organization has had HIV all her life. When she was born in Mexico in 1986, her mother required an emergency cesarean section, contracting HIV during a blood transfusion. Her mother then unknowingly breastfed her, and that's how she acquired HIV. It wasn't until 5 years later, when her dad started getting sick, that the family learned it had HIV. Her father died shortly after being diagnosed. Her mother was pregnant at the time, but was advised not to breastfeed. Despite getting cancer at the age of 10, Granados says she has had a very healthy life, but she feels the people who have had HIV since birth are often forgotten or ignored.
And finally, in NATO foreign ministers meeting in Oslo have debated providing security guarantees to Ukraine after its war with Russia ends, as the bloc looks to narrow divisions over Kyiv's push to join the bloc.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February last year has galvanized the Western military alliance set up almost 75 years ago to face off against the Soviet Union. But with just over 5 weeks to a summit of NATO leaders in Lithuania's capital, Vilnius, there are splits on key issues. Chief among them is Kyiv's push to join NATO, an organization that requires consensus to make decisions.
I'd like to underline that all allies agree that NATO's door is open, as we have demonstrated with Finland and Sweden, and all allies agree that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance, and all allies agree that it is for the NATO allies allies and Ukraine to decide when the time is right. It's not for Moscow to decide on NATO enlargement.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, backed by NATO countries in Eastern Europe, is calling for a clear message at the July summit that Kyiv will join once the war with Russia ends. But diplomats from NATO countries say its dominant military power, the United States, is reluctant to go further than a 2008 vow that Ukraine would one day become a member. Joining NATO would mean Ukraine would be covered by the alliance's Article 5 collective defense clause that obliges all allies to help defend it if attacked. One option being weighed is major powers offering Ukraine bilateral security assurances in the years before it becomes a full NATO member.
This is a very important stop on the road to the Leaders' Summit in Vilnius in just about a little over a month's time. And as the Secretary General said, and I can really only reiterate and reaffirm what he said, we have an intense focus on the support that we're continuing to provide to Ukraine to make sure that it prevails against the Russian aggression that's now been going on for well over a year.
French President Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday backed tangible and credible security guarantees for Ukraine, but there are major questions over how any commitments to Kyiv would work.
One of the stories of the last year and a half has been the extraordinary unity, the extraordinary solidarity of the NATO alliance. It's been very much one of the principal reasons for the success that Ukraine has had in pushing back against the Russian aggression.
Another issue for the gathering is a new pledge to boost NATO's current target for each member to spend at least 2% of gross domestic product on defense. Only 7 members hit that figure last year, and our allies agree on the need to make the 2% goal a floor, not a ceiling. But Eastern European members, which have already boosted defense spending beyond that, are disappointed by the lack of ambition shown by some allies. On the other side, members such as Canada and Luxembourg are reticent to make any greater ambition too concrete. One issue also being discussed by ministers on the sidelines of the meeting is finding a successor to Stoltenberg as NATO Secretary General. The former Norwegian Premier has held the post since 2014. Last year, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, his tenure was extended to September this year.
And that's all the international news we had for you this afternoon. We'll be back again tomorrow at 4 p.m. Please stay tuned. But coming up next, we have a live coverage of a service that's beginning in a few minutes at Namugongo Major Shrine as we prepare to celebrate the Uganda Matters. Please keep it urban. Thank you for watching and have a good afternoon.